The year was 1872, and the Arizona frontier baked under a relentless summer sun. Dust swirled in the wind, carrying with it the scent of mesquite and the unspoken tension between settlers and the Apache people who had roamed this land long before the first cabins had risen. For Eliza Whitmore, a young settler woman with soft brown hair and determined eyes, the land was both a prison and a promise. It was here, amid the red earth and endless skies, that she had found love where she least expected it, in the arms of an Apache warrior named Taza. Their love had been born in secret, nurtured under moonlight and hidden glances. Eliza, daughter of a widowed rancher, had grown up with walls around her heart, hardened by loss and by the whispers of a community that viewed her as too tender, too dreamy for frontier life. But Taza had seen her differently. He had called her Nash Doitoza Bahosan, the girl with the coyote's knowing eyes. To him, she was not fragile but strong, capable of weathering loneliness and holding to truth when others bowed to fear. But the world around them was not kind to such love. Settlers feared the Apache. Soldiers hunted them. And whispers of war rippled across the land, staining even the quiet moments between Eliza and Taza with dread. Still, they clung to each other, stealing every chance to meet by the river that cut through the canyon. It was there, one fateful evening, that their fragile happiness unraveled. The air smelled of rain, though the sky was still clear. Taza arrived with urgency in his stride, his dark hair pulled back, his eyes sharper than she had ever seen them. Eliza's heart sank before he even spoke. She knew. Something terrible had happened. "They come," he said simply, his voice low but steady. "Soldiers, they hunt us. My people scatter, but some will be caught. I may not return." Her throat tightened. "No, don't say that, Taza. There must be another way. You could stay hide here with me. My father is gone, and no one comes near the cabin anymore. Please." He silenced her with a gentle hand against her cheek. His touch was warm, grounding, but behind it was a storm. "If I stay, they find you. They will kill you. Elisa, to them, I am enemy. To them, you are worse for loving me." Her chest ached, her breaths coming shallow and quick. "Then, I will go with you. Wherever you run, I will follow." For the first time since she'd known him, she saw Taza's eyes glisten with unshed tears. He shook his head. "You are not meant for a life of running and hiding. You are meant for roots, for a home, for light. If you come with me, they will call you outcast, and the land will not forgive. You must stay." Her hands clutched his arms, as if she could hold him there by force. "I cannot just let you go to die. Not after all we've dreamed of. Not after you've given me your heart." Taza leaned his forehead against hers, and in the silence, she felt his heartbeat pounding, strong and desperate. "I will not give them my death easily. If I live, I will return to you. Remember that. Do not let go of hope, even when others tell you it is foolish. Remember me, Eliza." The rain finally broke, soft drops falling against their skin as if the heavens wept with her. She kissed him then, fiercely, as though she could breathe life into his soul and bind him to her forever. But when they parted, he stepped back, already fading into the shadows of the canyon. Eliza stood rooted to the earth, the storm washing her tears into the dust. She wanted to scream, to beg, to chase him, but her body refused to move. She could only watch as the man who held her heart disappeared into the darkness, carrying with him the unbearable weight of war and the fragile thread of a promise. That night, as thunder rolled and lightning split the sky, Eliza whispered to the empty cabin, "Come back to me. No matter how long it takes, I'll wait." And so began her vigil, one that would last not days, not months, but years, while the world insisted she was a fool, and her heart insisted otherwise. The nights after Taza's departure were the hardest. Eliza lay awake in her narrow bed, the lantern snuffed, listening to the howl of coyotes and the groan of the wind through the cabin walls. Every creak of the timber, every shadow at the window, set her heart racing with hope. Maybe he was back. Maybe he had survived and come for her. But each time, it was only the emptiness of the night, reminding her of the silence he left behind. Days turned to weeks, weeks to months, and still, no word. At first, Eliza's hope was fierce, like a flame refusing to be smothered. She tended the ranch as best she could, repairing fences, milking the cow, tending the small patch of vegetables her father had planted before his death. Each day she whispered his name, sending it into the wide sky like a prayer. Taza had promised to return if he lived, and she clung to that promise with a stubbornness that frightened even her. But the neighbors, already suspicious of her solitary ways, began to whisper louder. Mrs. Haggerty, the merchant's wife, had cornered her one afternoon. When Eliza came to trade butter for flour, her voice was sharp, though wrapped in the false kindness of pity. "You're wasting away up there on that ridge, child. Folks see you wandering at night, staring out across the canyon. They say you've gone soft in the head, waiting on a ghost." Eliza had straightened her back, her hands tightening on the basket. "He's not a ghost. He's alive, I know it." Mrs. Haggerty's lips had pursed, eyes narrowing. "Alive or not, he's an Apache. Best thing you can do is forget him before people decide you've betrayed your own." The words stung, but Eliza refused to answer. She knew what they thought. She knew they suspected the truth about her and Taza, though she had never confessed. It allowed, in the eyes of her community, loving him was a sin, an act of treachery against her people. But in her own heart, it was the truest thing she had ever known. By the second year, the loneliness had carved lines into her face, though she was still only 3. Her days blurred together, chopping wood, patching the roof, fending off coyotes that circled too close to the hen. The silence of the cabin pressed against her, heavy as stone. She began speaking to herself, to the fire, to the stars, anything to keep her voice alive, and still. The waiting gnawed at her. Sometimes, doubt whispered cruelly. What if he had fallen? That very night, arrows piercing his chest, and his bones lay bleaching under some unmarked sky. What if his promise had died with him, leaving her chained to a hope that would never be fulfilled? But then she would close her eyes and remember the feel of his forehead pressed to hers, his heartbeat strong against her palms. Taza had not lied. If he lived, he would return. She had to believe it. The seasons marked her vigil. In spring, she planted flowers by the river where they had last met, their colors a defiance against despair. In summer, she gathered wild berries and left them on a flat stone, as though he might come by and find them. In autumn, she traced his name in the dust of the canyon walls. And in winter, she sat by the fire, whispering his stories back to herself, the ones he had told her of his people, so she would never forget his voice. By the third year, the whispers in town had hardened into scorn. She's mad, they said, cursed. Maybe, no decent man will have her now. Suitors stopped calling, friends drifted away, and she became a figure of pity and ridicule. Children giggled behind their hands when she passed, calling her the ghost's wife. But Eliza only lifted her chin higher. If waiting 3 years had cost her the respect of the town, so be it. Love was not measured by their approval. One evening, as the sun bled red into the horizon, she stood by the cabin door, her shawl wrapped tight against the cooling air. She whispered aloud, her voice breaking, Taza, if you can hear me, if you are still alive, please come back. I've waited 3 years. I will wait forever, if I must, but don't let my hope die with me. Her words drifted into the wind, lost in the silence of the desert. And yet, somewhere beyond the horizon, in a place she could not see, Taza still breathed. And fate was already moving, preparing to answer her plea in a way neither she nor the town could ever have imagined. While Eliza fought her silent battle against loneliness on the frontier, Taza lived through a torment that would have broken most men. The night he left her cabin, the stars were veiled in storm clouds, and he had carried with him only a knife, a rifle, and the memory of Eliza's tear-streaked face. He had promised to return, but the path before him was one lined with blood and betrayal. The U.S. cavalry had been relentless in their pursuit of his band. Taza had thought to rejoin his people in the canyonlands, to warn them of patrols sweeping through, but fate had other plans. Before dawn, scouts discovered him, wounded his horse, and dragged him into custody after a brutal fight. He fought like a cornered mountain lion, but numbers overwhelmed him. Beaten, shackled, and bloodied, Taza was hauled to the nearest fort. His hands were bound in iron, his chest smeared with dirt and blood, yet his gaze burned defiance. He refused to bow his head before the soldiers. The months that followed blurred into a haze of suffering. The army wanted information where his people camped, where they kept their horses, which paths they traveled through the mountains. Taza gave them nothing. Silence was his weapon. Every blow, every lash, every kick against his ribs, he endured with clenched teeth, never betraying his people. Yet at night, when he lay chained in a cold cell, bruised and starving, his mind turned to Elisa. He remembered her soft voice, her trembling hands pressed against his chest, the firelight flickering in her eyes. It was the thought of her that kept him alive, that gave him the strength to face another day of cruelty without breaking. Seasons shifted. Sometimes they moved him, transferring him from fort to fort, each time farther from the homeland he loved. He was paraded as a prisoner, a savage, subdued, for settlers to gawk at. Children threw stones, women spat. Men cursed him, calling him murderer, beast, demon. But he stood tall, proud even in chains. His people were warriors, and warriors did not bow. There were moments when the darkness almost swallowed him. He bore scars that would never heal, slashes across his back, a deep wound in his shoulder that festered from a bayonet strike, the dull ache in his leg where a bullet had lodged. Fever nearly claimed him more than once. In his weakest hours, his thoughts drifted dangerously. Better to die than to live as a caged wolf. But then, in the silence, he heard Eliza's voice echo in his mind. Come back to me. The memory of her words became his anchor, his prayer. He whispered her name when no one could hear. She was the thread that stitched his soul together. By the second year, captivity became his hell. He had seen comrades, broken by despair, some who surrendered information just to end the pain. But Taza endured. His silence became infamous among the soldiers. Some respected him for it, others hated him more fiercely. A few officers argued for his execution, but the army had other plans, using him as leverage. They kept him alive as a symbol, proof of their dominance. To Taza, every day they allowed him to breathe was another day closer to freedom, another chance to one day find her again. Then came the third year. Rumors stirred among the guards of prisoners being transferred east. Far from Apache lands, a new prison awaited, one from which no return was likely. Taza's heart tightened at the thought if they carried him away, if the land itself was stripped from beneath his feet, how would Eliza ever find him? That night, lying on the cold earth of his cell, he pressed his forehead against the iron bars. The stars above were faint through the narrow slits in the wall, but he sought them anyway. Somewhere beyond those same stars, Eliza might be staring at the same night sky. He prayed not to the soldiers' god, not to the spirits of vengeance, but to the bond between them, that it would hold, no matter the chains, no matter the miles. When the chance came through fire, blood and rebellion, Asa would seize it. For love, for honor, for the woman who had waited in silence, he would find his way back. And so, while Eliza whispered his name to the wind, Taza clung to her memory through 3 years of captivity, unaware that destiny was already preparing the moment when their paths would collide again. The third year of Taza's captivity brought with it a heaviness that clung to his chest like a mountain pressing down. The soldiers believed his spirit had been broken. They grew careless, assuming the fire in his eyes had dimmed. But the warrior inside him was not extinguished, merely waiting. The prison at Fort Stanton was a place of iron and dust, walls of stone, barred windows, and armed men pacing like wolves around sheep. Yet Taza studied every weakness. He counted the guard shifts, memorized the rattle of keys, and marked the moments when shadows grew thick enough to cover a man's movements. To the soldiers, he was silent and defeated. In truth, he was a hawk biding his time. It came one evening when a storm rolled across the desert sky. Lightning split the heavens. Thunder boomed like the drums of war, and rain hammered the earth. The guards cursed and huddled close to their fires, careless in their misery. Taza sat shackled in his cell, his heart pounding like a war chant. Tonight, the spirits whispered. Tonight, when the storm reached its height, chaos broke. A fire sparked in the mess tent, spreading fast. Men shouted, running to douse the flames. In the confusion, a young soldier dropped his keys near the cells. Taza's hands, raw and scarred, shot through the bars like a striking snake. The iron scraped his skin as he snatched the ring and drew it back inside. He worked quickly, fitting the right key into the lock. For a moment, it stuck, and panic surged through him. If it fails now. But then the lock turned, and the door groaned open. He slipped into the night, a shadow among shadows. The rain was his ally. It masked his footsteps, softened the crunch of earth, and blurred the torch's light. He moved swiftly, silent as a hunting cat. He passed soldiers wrestling buckets of water, their faces glowing red in the firelight. And no one noticed the ghost that slid past them. At the stables, the smell of wet horses and hay filled his lungs. He found a chestnut stallion, strong and restless, kicking at its stall. Taza whispered softly in Apache, calming the beast, pressing his forehead to its neck. The horse stilled, as if it knew this man carried a destiny on his shoulders. Moments later, Taza burst from the fort on horseback, the storm wind whipping his hair, the shouts of discovery rising behind him. Bullets cracked through the night, some striking the mud near his heels, but the rain and thunder cloaked him. He did not look back. He rode as if the earth itself demanded his escape. Days turned into weeks as he crossed wilderness and canyon, always one step ahead of patrols sent to drag him back. His wounds reopened, hunger gnawed, and fever burned, yet he pressed on. Each sunrise was a reminder Eliza was waiting. Perhaps she thought him dead. Perhaps she had given up. But he could not. The land tested him. Rattlesnakes slithered across his path. Wolves shadowed him at night. And twice he nearly drowned, crossing swollen rivers. Yet he endured. He foraged roots and berries, hunted rabbits with traps of stone, and prayed to the spirits for strength. One evening, high on a ridge, Taza looked down at the wide, endless prairie stretching to the horizon. The sky bled with the colors of sunset. He closed his eyes and saw her face, Alyssa's tearful smile, her trembling voice the night he left. Don't go. That memory was no longer a wound but a fire, guiding him home. By the time the fort realized how far he had traveled, it was too late. The wilderness had swallowed him, just as it had once birthed him. To the soldiers, he became a ghost story, the Apache who vanished in the storm. But to Eliza, though she did not yet know it, he was a promise moving closer each day, a promise carved in blood, in endurance, in love that had refused to die. While Taza clawed his way back through wilderness and storm, Eliza's own battle was being fought in the silence of waiting. 3 years it was a lifetime when measured in lonely nights and empty mornings. Every day she rose before the sun, the prairie winds pulling at her hair, the same endless horizon stretching in every direction. She told herself he would come back. She whispered it like a prayer. Yet with each season that passed, each summer harvest, each winter frosty, voices around her grew sharper, Move on, Eliza, neighbors said, their eyes pitying, their mouths pursed with false kindness. He's gone, either killed or taken far. You're young, find a man who can keep you. But she shook her head. No man could replace Taza, not the rancher's son who eyed her at the market, not the widower who hinted she might be a fine wife. To help raise his children, her heart was not free, it had been given, and though torn by absence, it remained bound to him. Still, doubt crept in like a thief. There were nights when she sat by the fire, staring at the empty chair beside her, her hands trembling. What if they were right? What if he truly was gone? She would clutch the small pouch he had given her, the one filled with beads and eagle feathers, and press it to her heart. The scent of him lingered faintly, and it was enough to keep her from despair. Life was not easy in those years. She struggled to hold on to the little homestead they had begun together. The soil was stubborn, water scarce, and hands too few. She learned to mend fences, drive cattle, and thatch a leaking roof. Her back ached, her fingers blistered, but she did not falter. Taza had taught her strength, and she wore it now like armor. The community around her was not unkind, but she was an outsider in many ways. The women whispered when she walked by, remembering she had chosen an Apache warrior over the many white men who had sought her hand. To them, she was reckless, foolish. To the men, she was either a temptation or a burden. Yet Eliza held her head high, her blue eyes fierce with quiet defiance. She did not need their approval. She needed only one thing, to see him again, at night, when the wind howled across the plains. She dreamed of him. Sometimes it was a dream of warmth, his arms, strong around her, his voice low as he whispered her name. Other times it was a dream of fear, him chained, beaten, calling out to her across an endless void. She would wake gasping, clutching the blanket, tears hot on her cheeks. One evening, after another long day of toil, Eliza sat on the porch, her gaze fixed on the western horizon. The sunset burned crimson and gold, and for a moment it felt like the sky itself was bleeding. Her chest tightened. She whispered aloud, though no one was there to hear, "Don't go, please. I've waited for you." Her words echoed back. In the silence, swallowed by the prairie wind, though she spoke with faith, her body showed the strain. She had grown thinner, the shadows under her eyes darker. Loneliness carved itself into her, but it also sharpened her resilience. She no longer wept in front of others, no longer allowed her grief to show. To the town, she appeared steady, composed. Only the walls of her home knew the truth, the endless ache, the longing she buried beneath labor and prayer. By the end of the third year, hope flickered like a candle nearly snuffed. She had not stopped believing, but belief had grown heavy. Each day she told herself, just one more day, one more sunrise. Yet in the secret places of her heart, she feared the truth, that she might wait until her last breath, and he would never return. Still she waited, because love, once given, is not so easily broken. And though her heart was frayed, it clung to one thread, the memory of his promise. "I will come back." She whispered it again as the stars emerged that night, their cold lights scattered across the sky. "Come back to me, Taza, please." And somewhere, though she could not know it, the man she prayed for was already riding toward her. The moon was high when Taza paused on the ridge, his breath rising in the chill night air. Below, the land stretched in silver shadows, familiar and foreign all at once. He had not set foot here in 3 years, yet every bend in the creek, every rise of the hills whispered to him of home. But what was home now? He shifted in the saddle, his body heavy with scars. The lash of a whip had carved its story across his back. The years of chains had stolen the ease from his limbs. Even his spirit, once as unbreakable as the mountains, bore cracks. He had clawed his way free of captivity, survived hunger, beatings, endless miles of escape, but the hardest trial lay ahead. Would she still want him? He closed his eyes and saw Eliza's face, blue eyes bright with laughter, lips warm with promises whispered beneath the stars. He could still feel the softness of her touch the night before he was taken. She had clung to him, begged him not to go hunting with the men, but he had gone anyway, believing himself strong, believing danger could not touch him. He had been wrong. The memory of her was the only thing that had kept him alive. In the camp where they had held him, when the days bled together in endless torment, he had carved her name in the dirt with trembling fingers. When the guards laughed, when they beat him for refusing to break, he thought of her voice, her courage, the fire in her spirit. He swore he would return to her, no matter the cost. Now, here he was, the cost paid in flesh and soul, yet fear clutched him. He was not the man she had known. He was older, worn, less certain. Would she even recognize him? Would she recoil at the sight of his scars, the darkness in his eyes? Or worse, had she moved on, as any woman might after 3 long, hopeless years? His horse shifted beneath him, sensing his turmoil. Taza patted its neck, steadying it as much as himself. The horizon glowed faintly with dawn, and his heart hammered. He was close, now too close to turn back, too close to delay. As he rode, fragments of memory rose with each mile. The day he first saw her at the riverbank, pale dress billowing in the breeze. The sound of her laugh as he tried to teach her, words in his tongue. The way she had defied both their peoples to stand by him. Those memories warmed him like fire, but they also sharpened the dread gnawing at him. What if she had been forced to marry another? What if she had grown weary of waiting and chosen safety instead of dreams? Could he blame her? And if she had, not if she had waited, what would he bring to her life now but burden and danger? Still, his body moved forward as if led by fate. He could not stop. Every trail, every star in the sky, seemed to pull him toward her. By midday, he reached the valley where their small homestead had stood. His heart seized when he saw smoke curling from the chimney. The house still stood. The fence, though weathered, was mended. There were signs of life. She was still here. His hands trembled as he dismounted. He tied his horse to the post but lingered, unable to move closer. For long minutes he stood in the dirt yard, staring at the door, afraid to knock, afraid to breathe. Inside, he heard movement, the soft clatter of dishes, the faint hum of a woman's voice. His throat closed. It was her, Elisa. She was alive. She was here. And the sound of her song carried across the years as if no time had passed. Taza sank to his knees in the dust. His strength, forged in fire and pain, faltered at the simple sound of her voice. Tears he had not shed in captivity spilled now, freely, silently. He had come so far, through so much, and now just steps away. He feared the answer more than any blade, any chain. Would she still love him? Or would this be the cruelest wound of all, to find the door closed, not by death or distance, but by her choice? The sun dipped lower, and shadows lengthened around him. At last, gathering what remained of his courage, Taza rose, his hand lifted, trembling, toward the door. With a breath that carried 3 years of longing, he stepped forward. Eliza was humming softly as she moved about the small kitchen. The sound was not cheerful, but it was steady, a rhythm she had built to keep herself from breaking. 3 years had passed, and though the world had told her he was gone, her heart had refused to let go. She had kept the house alive, kept the garden growing, kept the bedmate on his side as if he would walk through the door at any moment. And yet, even now, she often wondered if she was a fool. The neighbors had shaken their heads, pity in their eyes. "You must move on," they said. "No man survives captivity that long. You're too young to waste your life waiting on a ghost." But she had smiled politely, then turned back to her lonely evenings, to the candle she lit in the window. Every night, her silent beacon in case Taza still lived. That candle still burned. Tonight, it flickered in the dim light of dusk, just as it always had. Then came the knock. It was soft at first, almost hesitant, so faint she thought she imagined it. She froze, heart leaping painfully. Her breath caught in her throat as it came. Again 3 gentle raps against the wood. Her hands trembled as she set down the bowl she had been holding. Who could it be at this hour? Fear and hope warred inside her. For one wild, impossible moment, she thought, could it be him? Slowly, she wiped her hands on her apron and walked to the door. She pressed her palm against the wood, steadying herself before pulling it open. And there he was. Taza stood in the fading light, tall but thinner than she remembered. His once proud frame marked by scars and weariness. His dark eyes, once so fierce, now carried shadows too deep to name. His hair, longer and unkempt, blew across his face in the evening breeze. He looked both like her Taza and a stranger forged from suffering. For a moment, Eliza could not move. She gripped the doorframe, every part of her trembling. "No," she whispered, voice cracking. "No, this isn't real." Taza swallowed, hard, his lips parting, as though words had abandoned him. He lowered his head slightly, as if unworthy of her gaze, and whispered her name, "Eliza." The sound broke her. With a cry, she stumbled forward, her hands flying to his face, his shoulders, his chest touching him as though she expected him to vanish into smoke. Tears blurred her sight as she whispered over and over, "It's you, it's really, oh, God, it's you." Taza closed his eyes, pressing his forehead against hers. The familiar warmth of her touch melted something frozen deep inside him. His strong arms, though scarred, wrapped around her carefully, almost reverently, as if he feared she might shatter. "I am here," he murmured, voice rough. "I told you I would come back." Eliza sobbed against him, clinging so tightly. Her knuckles whitened. "They said you were dead. They said I was a fool for waiting, but I knew in my heart you were still alive." Her tears soaked his shirt, but he welcomed them. Each tear felt like a piece of his own pain washing away. He held her until the trembling slowed, until her sobs softened into quiet breaths. When, at last, she pulled back to look at him, she cupped his face with both hands. Her eyes searched his features, tracing every line, every scar. "What did they do to you?" she whispered, horror and sorrow in her gaze. Taza shook his head slightly. "It does not matter. I survived because of you, because I carried your face, your voice, in my heart. It is the only thing that kept me alive." Eliza's lips trembled, then curved into a broken smile. "And I survived because I never stopped believing. Every night, I prayed. Every night, I lit the candle." He glanced past her shoulder into the house, and his eyes caught on the faint golden flicker in the window. A light, burning for him. His throat tightened, and he pressed his lips to her forehead. "You waited," he said softly, awe in his voice. "I waited," she replied, firm now, her voice steady despite the tears. "And I would have waited a lifetime more." The sun dipped fully below the horizon, and the stars began to appear. In the quiet yard, with the soft glow of the candle behind them, Taza and Eliza stood in each other's arms, two souls who had fought through years of loss, fear, and despair, and at last found each other again. But though their hearts were reunited, both knew the hardest part was yet to come. Taza had returned, but not unchanged, and the world around them would not easily forgive what they were. For now, though in that fragile moment, nothing else mattered. He was home. Eliza guided Taza inside with trembling hands, as if she feared he might vanish if she let go. The little house was warm, the hearth glowing with steady embers, the table set with the simple supper she had prepared for herself. Taza paused at the threshold, his dark eyes sweeping over the space. It was as he remembered every chair, every pot, the faded quilt folded neatly on the bench. Yet there was a stillness, a weight that spoke of 3 long years of waiting. Eliza lit another candle and set it on the table. Its glow painted his face, and she gasped softly. The shadows had hidden it before, but now she saw clearly the marks. Time and cruelty had left. A scar down his jaw, burns across his arm, the hollowness in his cheeks from hunger endured. Her hand trembled as she reached out, gently tracing the line of the scar with her fingertip. "What did they do to you?" she whispered again, her voice breaking. Taza caught her hand, holding it against his skin. "Do not look at these," he said softly. "They are only reminders of what I endured. Look at me, Eliza. I am here. That is what matters." But she could not look away. Her tears spilled again, her heart aching at the thought of what suffering he must have faced. She drew him to the fire, urging him to sit. He sank into the chair with a weary sigh, and for the first time in years, allowed himself to feel the comfort of a home. Eliza knelt beside him, taking his hand in both of hers. "Tell me," she said firmly, her blue eyes locked onto his. "Tell me everything. Don't hide it from me. I need to know." For a long time, Taza was silent, staring into the flames. The crackle of the fire was the only sound in the room. Finally, he began to speak, his voice low and halting. "They captured me in the canyon. I fought, but there were too many. They bound me, dragged me away like an animal. They tried to break me, chins, beatings, hunger. They wanted me to renounce who I was, to give up my people, my spirit. I would not. Each day they thought I would die, but each day I lived." Eliza gripped his hand tighter, tears streaming silently down her cheeks. He turned to her then, his dark eyes burning with a mixture of pain and pride. "I lived because of you. Every night I saw your face in my mind. When they beat me, I thought of your touch. When they starved me, I imagined your bread. When they cursed me, I remembered your voice saying my name. You were my strength." Eliza's sob turned into a broken laugh, half joy, half sorrow. She pressed his hand to her heart. "And you were mine, Taza. I told myself you were a Levi, refused to stop believing. Every night, I lit that candle. I wanted its light to guide you home." Taza's gaze softened. He lifted his hand and brushed her cheek, his calloused thumb catching her tears. "It did," he whispered. "I saw it tonight, burning in the window. It led me to you." They sat in silence, their foreheads resting together, their breaths mingling. For the first time in 3 years, their souls were not separated by distance or despair. After a while, Eliza rose and fetched bread and stew, setting it before him. He hesitated, then ate slowly, each bite with the reverence of a man who had known starvation. She watched, her heart swelling, and promised silently that he would never go hungry again. When he finished, she reached for his hand once more. "You are safe now," she said, voice steady despite the storm of emotions within her. "This is your home. Whatever you endured is behind you. Here, you will heal." Taza looked at her long and hard, his eyes glimmering in the firelight. "I am afraid," he admitted quietly. "Afraid I am no longer the man you loved." Elisa shook her head fiercely, tears glistening on her lashes. "You are more. You are the man who survived, who came back to me when everyone said you never would. I love you not despite your scars, but because of them. They are proof of your strength, of the bond that kept us alive." Her words pierced the shadows that clung to him. He bowed his head, overcome, and she wrapped her arms around him, holding him as though she would never let go again. The fire crackled, the candle flickered, and in that small home, a warrior broken by captivity and a woman broken by waiting found their pieces slowly knitting back together. Outside, the night stretched dark and silent, but inside, love burned brighter than fear. The next morning, the light of dawn spilled across the plains, painting the horizon in shades of gold and rose. Eliza stirred early, her heart lighter than it had been in years. For the first time, she did not wake to silence, but to the steady sound of another's breath beside her. Taza lay on the pallet near the fire, his face at peace in sleep. She knelt quietly, brushing a stray lock of hair from his brow, marveling that he was truly here, flesh and blood, not just a dream born of her lonely prayers, but outside, the world had already begun to shift. The old ranch hand, Thomas, who lived a mile down the road, had ridden by the night before and noticed a dark figure entering Eliza's cabin. Word spread quickly in such a small town, and by sunrise, whispers had reached the mercantile and saloon. The Apache warrior thought dead had returned. Some spoke with awe, others with suspicion, many with fear. By mid-morning, when Eliza went out to fetch water, she felt the change. 2 women stood by the well, buckets in hand, their chatter cutting off the moment she approached. They gave her long, wary glances, their whispers carrying on the wind after she passed. One muttered the word savage, and though Eliza's shoulders stiffened, she kept her head high. She would not let them see her tremble. When she returned, Taza was awake, seated at the table with a piece of bread. He watched her carefully, his eyes narrowing. "They know," he said simply. Eliza froze, the bucket heavy in her hands. "What do you mean?" He tapped his ear lightly. "Their voices carry. They do not welcome me here." Her throat tightened. "Then we'll prove them wrong. You've done nothing but survive, Taza. You belong here as much as anyone." But even as she spoke, doubt gnawed at her. She had seen the way the townsfolk looked at her before, already wary of her marriage. Too, an Apache, his return from captivity would not soften their judgment. The day passed with unease. Riders passed the cabin more than usual, slowing their horses to glance at the window. A group of men lingered near the edge of the property line, pretending to check fence posts while their eyes searched the house. That night, as the fire burned low, Taza stood by the window, silent as a stone. Eliza approached, her hand sliding into his. "What is it?" "They will come," he said at last. "Men with guns. They will say it is for the safety of their families. But truly, they fear what they do not understand." Eliza's heart thudded, painfully. "Then we'll face them together. I won't let them drive you away, not after all I've waited for." His gaze softened at her words, but his jaw remained tense. "If danger comes, you must promise me something." "No," she interrupted firmly, shaking her head. "Don't ask me to leave you, Taza. Don't ask me to hide or run. My place is with you." For a moment, they simply stood there, the flicker of the flames painting shadows across their faces. Finally, Taza lifted her hand and pressed it to his chest. "Then we will stand together." The following day, the whispers became action. A knock thundered against the cabin door, sharp and demanding. Eliza's breath caught, and she turned to Taza. He straightened, his broad frame filling the doorway as he opened it. On the porch stood Sheriff Miller, flanked by 3 townsmen armed with rifles. The sheriff's expression was grim, his hat pulled low. "Evening, Eliza." "Evening, Taza," he said, his tone clipped. "Word is, you're back from the dead. Folks are uneasy about it." Taza said nothing, his dark eyes unflinching. Eliza stepped forward, chin raised. "He's not a ghost, Sheriff. He's my husband, and he's done nothing to harm this town." One of the men spat to the side. "He don't need to, as kind, bring trouble wherever they go." Anger flared in Eliza's chest, but before she could speak, the sheriff raised a hand. "No one's saying he's guilty. But the people want answers. We need to know he won't bring the Comanche down on our heads." The words hung heavy in the air. Eliza felt Taza stiffen beside her. She knew this was only the beginning, the first knock on the door before a storm that could tear everything apart. But as the men waited for a reply, she slid her hand into his and held it tight. No matter what they said, no matter what danger threatened, she would not let go. The knock on the door still echoed in Eliza's ears long after Sheriff Miller and his men rode away. They had left without violence, but their warning was clear. The town was watching, waiting, and any misstep would be the end of Taza's freedom. That night, as the fire crackled low, Eliza could not sleep. She lay awake, listening to the steady rhythm of Taza's breath, her mind twisting with fear. She had prayed for his return for 3 years, and now that he was here, the world threatened to tear him from her arms again. When dawn came, she rose early and went outside, hoping the chill air would clear her thoughts. Instead, she found 3 more riders at the fence line, watching the cabin with narrowed eyes. The message was plain. Taza was not welcome. Inside, Taza was already awake. He tied his hair back with deliberate calm, his movements smooth and purposeful. Eliza watched him, her heart sinking. "You're leaving," she whispered. His dark eyes lifted to hers, full of pain, but steady as stone. "If I stay, they will bring war to your doorstep. I will not see you harmed because of me." Her throat tightened, and she shook her head, tears spilling before she could stop them. "Don't you see, it's too late for that. If you leave now, they'll think they were right that you were a danger. They'll say you ran because you had something to hide." He hesitated, the muscle in his jaw tightening. She stepped forward, pressing her hands against his chest. "I waited 3 years, Taza. I buried you in my heart 100 times, but I never let go. Don't ask me to let go now, not when I finally have you back." For a long moment, silence stretched between them, then his arms wrapped around her, fierce and unyielding, as if he were anchoring himself in her very soul. "Then we stay," he murmured against her hair. "No matter what comes." The test arrived before midday. A mob of townsmen rode up, more than a dozen strong rifles across their saddles. Sheriff Miller was at the front, his expression strained, as though torn between duty and mercy. They dismounted at the edge of the yard, their boots crunching against the dry earth. Eliza stood on the porch, her chin high, while Taza stepped beside her. The two of them, side by side, against the tide of fear. "You have no right to come here armed," Eliza called, her voice sharper than she felt. "This is my land, my home. My husband has harmed no one." A murmur rippled through the men, some uneasy, others hardened with prejudice. One Menjicode Finch, a rancher who had lost family in old raids, stepped forward. His voice was laced with bitterness. "No harm yet, but his people, they've taken lives. How do we know he won't bring them back here?" Taz's voice, low and firm, cut through the tension. "My fight was never with you. I was taken, broken, left to die. I return only to live, to be with my wife. If my people come, it will not be for war. It will be for me." The words seemed to ripple through the crowd, shaking the ground of their anger. Still, Jacob sneered. "And if you're lying," Eliza stepped forward, her hands trembling but her voice steady, "then you'll have to take me to Bakasaka. I will not let you drag him away. You want to call him savage. Then you call me savage too, because he is my husband and I am his wife. That's the truth you'll have to live with." The sheriff's eyes flickered between her defiance and Taza's stillness. Finally, he raised a hand. "Enough. There's no law against a man returning to his wife. You may not like it, but you'll respect it. Now go home." The men muttered, some angry, some reluctant, but slowly, one by one, they mounted their horses and turned back. Only Jacob lingered, his glare burning like a brand, before he finally rode off. When the dust settled, Eliza sagged against Taza, her strength trembling. He caught her, his arm steady, his breath warm against her hair. "They'll be back," she whispered. "Maybe," he said softly, "but we will face them together." And in that moment, with the prairie wind whistling around them and the sun breaking through the clouds, Eliza felt something stronger than fear, stronger even than the years of grief. She felt the truth that had carried her through every lonely night. Love like theirs could not be broken, not by time, not by fear, not by the judgment of others. Data bent his head and kissed her, slow and certain, sealing the vow neither of them needed words to make. Whatever came next, they would stand together.